If any of you watch the news, and any of you read a paper or listen to the radio, you're aware of this presidential campaign. You're aware that Florida is ground zero. You're aware that Broward is responsible for some of the margin to make up for the negative numbers in North Florida and so forth. You're obviously all, I don't think there's a person here who doesn't or has not heard the term Bain Capital.
Right.
I want an honest show of hands. Is there anyone here who has not heard the term Bain? Other perhaps than it might be the bane of his existence. No. Okay. I think what we're seeing is the earliest intensity of the presidential campaign, which is obviously going to get worse. We will see it much worse in Florida. I talked about it last month, that I think clearly at least $100 million will be spent in Florida between the two presidential campaigns and all these third-party groups. You should also be aware, if you're not, because you need to talk about it, that a bill came up in the Senate, the Democratic Senate, in which to play music. That just shows we're Democrats because we're not perfect. A bill came up that passed. I think got 51 votes. But you know that you need to have at least 60 because of the archaic rules of the Senate, because of the filibuster. So Republicans were able to not get a majority or prevent a majority, but they were able to prevent a bill to pass over to the House. That bill was not a radical bill. That bill was to force people who give money in political campaigns to be disclosed who they are. We have that very bad decision of the Supreme Court that currently allows third-party groups to go out and solicit and collect money without a limit, which is why some of these folks can write a check instead of having to get 10 employees to give $30,000, whatever the number is. They can just write a check for $2 or $3 million a piece, as they are doing. This bill would not have prevented that. It's small steps. This bill was to ask that they be disclosed. What's interesting is on third-party law, the federal law says that these groups can only exist if their primary, and that's the term, if their primary purpose is not political. But that bill didn't pass the Senate because of the filibuster rule, just asking for disclosure. And the reason I bring this up is because I mentioned last time, and I'll say it again, I think the chances are very substantial that we will be outspent in this election. There's no question. The Democratic Party and President Obama will be outspent because of these third-party groups. And one of the reasons is because of the tenor of the times. The President made a comment the other day in Virginia last Friday, taken out of context because I had a fight about it on the radio this morning in my usual Tuesday morning WIRD radio fight. In talking about where the President said that no matter how successful people are, no one has done it alone. And that's true. And of course the right was very annoyed because he gave the example of perhaps a teacher played a special role in somebody's development or their psyche. Or talked about a road being built. And if a store was successful, it might not have been had that road not been built by government. And talked about basically that we're all in this together. And that someone who's successful still sweated, still was up at night, still worried about making payrolls. But it was a collaborative effort. And then, of course, that engendered the far right, which is now so far we can't even define it, and engendered and engaged the spokesman for the Republican Party. And does anybody know who that would be? Because it sure isn't Rance Priebus. Rush Limbaugh. And I want to read a quote that Rush Limbaugh said just the other day, which more or less explains to us what we are up against. And I think why the President was talking about we need to be part of a family, which incidentally is very hard to be part of a family when the Republican leader of the Senate says the day after you're inaugurated, our only job is to make him a one-term president. It wasn't his job to make this country better. It wasn't his job to make the economy better, meaning the Republicans in the Senate. No, their only job, as clearly announced, was to be obstructionist and make this a one-term president without any regard to the president and the country. And that, of course, was Mitch McConnell. But Rush Limbaugh's comment in response to the comment by the president was, President Obama hates this country, and his philosophy appeals to people with miserable and meaningless lives and people who just don't count. Well, I would tell you that that would obviously include all of us. And I think we can make the best example by making sure that we do everything we can do to help this president. Because if you watch TV, the new tack is to say he's not American. His thoughts, it's code words, his thoughts are foreign. And a recent poll came out where a significant number of folks still don't believe what religion he is. We folks have our work cut out for us. And if we want to make sure that we re-elect this president, and if we want to make sure it's done by carrying Florida, and if we want to make sure that a new congressional seat that Alan West ran from, and that our Democratic nominee is a priority race for us, and if we want to make sure that Maria Sachs is here, so that's also a pickup Senate seat, so we pick up a House seat, we pick up a Senate seat, we help Democrats get elected, and we make sure that this kind of hatred ends with this election. The best way and the only way we can do that is to make sure that Democrats do everything they can to be united and do everything they can to deliver Florida. If that happens, they will go away. We have to